Good morning, everybody. This is Don Pren with InsMark. I'm really excited about today's program. I think you're going to love what you're going to see here. Very new concepts that I think will be very powerful for your business and your clients. This is our fourth webinar in our series, the InsMark Sales Idea webinar series with Chris Jacob. Chris is a top retail producer who we're working with on this webinar series. Basically, we've been doing these about once a month where Chris will show different strategies that he uses with one or more of the InsMark software products, whether that's the InsMark system or Wealthy and Wise or what have you, and how he applies those in the real world with clients. What we're going to do today, here in just a minute, is I'm going to finish this intro, and then I'm going to flip it over to Chris, and he's going to show you kind of the summary graphs of where we're going to end up after he runs you through all the details of the case. But I think what you're going to see from these summary graphs is the powerful impact that can be made by combining a CHEIFS home equity transaction where we get cash to clients who have considerable equity in their home, with then repositioning those funds in a deferred annuity. And the results are really impressive. Once Chris shows kind of the basics summary graph that we're going to end up with so that you see kind of where we're headed, then I'm going to flip it over to one of the co-founders of Cornerstone, Craig Korn, who's going to walk you through how the CHEIFS transaction works to access home equity for the client. I'm going to then show you kind of the nuts and bolts of how the math works with the home equity product. And then kind of at the end of the presentation, Chris Jacob is going to run you through the details of the case that ended up with these incredible summary graphs you're going to see here in just a second. Again, we think this is really, really new, revolutionary planning strategies for people with equity in their homes who are wanting to reposition some of that equity in a more efficient way. With that said, Chris, I'd like to flip it over to you. Chris Jacobs going to show sort of the summary graphs of the before and after that's going to kind of show you why we're talking about this today and why it can have such a meaningful impact. Go ahead, Chris.
Can you guys all see my screen? Yep, hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, good. By the way, I have been a retail producer since 1984 and started working with InsMark software in 1987. So this is one of the most exciting things I've seen that's been incorporated into InsMark in a long, long time. So kind of to start from the beginning, we'll start from the end. What's the ultimate that we're looking to do here is by freeing up some dormant equity in a home, what can you do by, in this case, incorporating that into an indexed annuity? And we're going to look at just charts and graphs to begin with. Ultimately, we'll show you how we built this thing. But what you're going to see here, these are the numbers. I'm going to have some graphs here in a minute where somebody's taking 190 grand a year adjusted for inflation at 2%. You'll notice status quo and CHEIFS plan identical. But there's something new for some of you who haven't been into the InsMark Wealthy and Wise module lately. There's a liquid assets comparison that we can now do as opposed to just net worth. And I want to focus on year 20, life expectancy, joint life expectancy, and if somebody makes it to 40. So here's those graphs. In year 20, the income's the same, but you're better off by about $500,000 in liquid assets. Let's get out to life expectancy. Same income, an increase in liquid net worth by 2.3 million. And if somebody makes it 40 years, we got a little better than $5.1 million of additional liquid assets, as you're going to see just by freeing up about $300,000 in liquid assets and from CHEIFS and the same income, while at the same time getting more wealth to heirs. And then one other would be, can you, by incorporating CHEIFS and an annuity, deliver more income? And that's what you're going to see here, starting off with 225,000 adjusted for inflation. And let's again focus year 20, life expectancy, and year 40. Well, got about $500,000 more in liquid there. Here at life expectancy, about 2.2 million, same income, but get out to 40 years. We've got projected $2.4 million more of income and still maintaining liquid assets of $1.3 million, and all the while also generating more wealth to heirs. So stay tuned for how this was built. Okay. And I think I'm now going to turn it over to you,
Let me
Session.
just say one thing, Chris, before you do.
Go ahead.
So the idea here that uh, is going to be explained in the next few minutes is Cornerstone has developed a very unique home equity product. And the reason it's unique is it's not developed for people who are desperate for liquidity, like the companies that in the reverse mortgage space, the shared appreciation space. But it's designed for people who have plenty of liquidity, but they see accessing their home equity as a way to improve their overall financial plan in terms of how much income is available to them during retirement, as well as their liquidity position. So it is creating an entirely new market, which dovetails perfectly with the types of clients that you all have, which is, I'll use this term loosely, but the affluent people who have some assets, own their home, have some liquidity. This CHEIFS transaction you're going to hear more about now happens to be an effective financial transaction for the overall plan. And that's why it works so perfectly with Wealthy and Wise. So if we could, Session, can you bring up Craig's PowerPoint? And Craig, let me throw it over to you to explain the CHEIFS home equity product for the affluent client.
Don, thank you. And Chris, that was a great introduction. Looking forward to talking about Cornerstone and CHEIFS. So, Sachin, can you go to the next slide, please? So, along with my partner, Dan Anderson, who's on this call with me, we're the founders of Cornerstone Financing. As Don mentioned, we're the company that has delivered to the financial advisor community our CHEIFS funding product and program, where for the first time, advisors can efficiently utilize their clients' dormant home equity, which we know is often their client's largest asset on their personal balance sheet, as an alternative way to fund critically important retirement-oriented insurance and investment products and strategies, as opposed to using cash on hand or liquidating assets under management without taking on debt or monthly cash flow obligations. So let's talk about CHEIFS and how you can use CHEIFS to better serve your customers. So the easiest way to think about CHEIFS is it gives homeowners the ability to sell a fraction of their home in return for a lump sum of money without the requirement to make any monthly payments while the transaction is outstanding. In effect, it changes the paradigm that an individual can only own either 100% of their home or 0% if they are a renter. CHEIFS allow homeowners to sell a fraction of their home, yet retain, importantly, 100% of the utility benefits associated with home ownership. Now, as you all know, while most home financing products typically have a fixed maturity date, usually 30 years, CHEIFS have no maturity, with repayment triggered by death, permanent move out, or voluntary repayment with no prepayment penalties, which creates greater flexibility for the homeowner. CHEIFS are allowed on owner-occupied property, which can include a second, a third, fourth home, any number of homes that your client occupy but don't use as investment properties. In addition, CHEIFS can be executed on residential property that has an existing mortgage, where the CHEIFS can sit in a second position behind the existing mortgage. CHEIFS have been structured to provide customer protections, such as the homeowner always retaining a minimum of 50% of the value of the property to ensure appropriate alignment between homeowner and Cornerstone, and to cap the cost the homeowner can potentially pay to no greater than a 12.99% annualized cost, which protects against the risk that home prices increase significantly. On the other hand, CHEIFS also share in losses should home prices depreciate over time. It truly is like selling a portion of your AUM with protections in place to avoid severely negative outcomes for your homeowner client. Sachin, next slide, please. So Cornerstone's chief product is designed for the mass affluent, as Don mentioned. and that demographic served by financial advisors such as yourselves. We created CHEIFS to address perhaps the most challenging part of providing financial advice, which is how to fund products and strategies recommended by advisors. Historically, as you all know, options are pretty limited to cash and AUM liquidation, which have their own consequences, such as reducing client liquidity, addressing tax implications associated with a highly appreciated stock portfolio, putting aside the fact that AUM liquidation eliminates future opportunity gains. And as you all know, where you invest your clients' money matters. As an example, the stock market has outperformed the housing market by nearly 8% per year over the past 80 years. Next slide, Sachin. So the market opportunity, not surprising for CHEIFS, is enormous, considering the significant amount of home equity tied up in the housing market. At Cornerstone, we saw this as an opportunity to present to financial advisors a $35 trillion dormant asset class that can be used as an alternative way to fund investment and insurance products that would typically be funded with cash on hand and AUM liquidation, such as the $450 billion in new life, annuity, and long-term care insurance premiums that were originated in 2024, that by definition were funded with cash on hand or AUM liquidation. So let's now talk about how CHEIFS work. For every dollar we invest in your client's home, we initially own a percentage of the home equal to the amount invested divided by the home value. Our ownership percentage will then grow over time to provide Cornerstone an opportunity to make a commercial return on its investment. But in no instance will our investment return be greater than a 12.99% annualized return, with the expectations that our returns will be closer to 5 to 10% based on long-term home price appreciation. So, Sheen, if you click the next line, you can see this return profile on the yellow line in this graph. So early, we earn potentially 12.99%, but as the transaction goes on, and I think Don is going to show this very, very clearly, our return profile starts to approach long-term home price appreciation, which can get down to that 3, 4, 5, 6% per year scenario. So let's go through a real example. Assume we invest $100,000 in your client's $1 million home. At the time of closing, we own 10% of your client's home. That ownership percentage will grow over time, ultimately reaching, in this example, a maximum ownership percentage of 22.5% of your client's home, evidenced by the green line in this graph. As you can see, as we go from a 10 to 22.5% ownership, which takes typically about 8 plus years, assuming home prices were to appreciate at 3% per year, if that borrower were to pay off the transaction or pass away or just permanently move out, we're more likely than not to earn a 12.99% return on our money. But if the client were to stay in that home for an extended period of time, and we always stress, and I think Chris and Don will, harp on this, CHEIFS are intended for longer term type of transactions, longer term solutions. And as you can see, the longer the transaction is outstanding, the more cost efficient it is for your client to have entered into a CHEIFS deal. We can show you how attractive CHEIFS are compared to other financing that's out there. So click a few times, Sachin. That's great. So compared to other home financing products like a HELOC, which you can see in the dotted yellow line here, HELOCs might be cheaper from an annualized cost perspective, but it's important to note that monthly payments are required with a HELOC transaction, and they also come with after-tax dollars, which makes HELOCs quite expensive, actually, relative to CHEIFS. Likewise, when you look at a reverse mortgage, which is the green dashed line, the high costs associated with reverse mortgages, you're pretty familiar with that. And it's clearly demonstrated in the graph why typically mass affluent customers don't consider reverse mortgages. We're certainly not saying, and I think Don will say this, that Chiefs are for everyone, but for those people who are looking for longer term ways of optimizing their overall balance sheet, Chiefs are a very effective way to fund the type of insurance and investment products that we're talking about. And Sasheen, if you go to the last slide, this is helpful in setting up Chris and Don for their part of the presentation. The cost profile of Chiefs, it's easy to see from an asset allocation perspective how Chief stacks up versus other potential returns associated with deploying Chief proceeds. So as an example, if Chief proceeds are deployed into assets that generate a 10% investment yield, the break-even time horizon is roughly 12 years. And what's important about that is, again, think about that longer-term profile, Chiefs versus other assets, when Don and Chris go through the examples that they're going to go through, that this is really about a very effective longer-term funding strategy for you and for your clients. So Don, let me pass it to you and we'll go from there.
That's great. And what I'm going to do is share my screen now. Hopefully I can do this right. And what I'm going to do is show you. So those of you who have used Wealthy and Wise, this is going to make sense. Those of you who have never used Wealthy and Wise, this is one of our two main software products, where essentially what you do is you put in the client's assets, liabilities, when they want to retire, their assumptions on what their pension plan is going to grow at, and their tax assumptions. It's very simple. You enter in different things in each of these tabs. What we've done in the last month or two is we've integrated the Chiefs Home Equity Plan inside Wealthy and Wise. And so what you're looking at here is when I go to this tab, liabilities, liquid assets, and here's the principal residence. This particular client has a house worth $1.5 million. We're assuming it grows at 3%. And then I'm going to include a Chiefs plan. That's all new. This is all brand new. You all have this if you have Wealthy and Wise, but it's all been done in the last month. And then if we edit details, and you're going to love this because it's very simple. Essentially, on a $1.5 million home that has no debt, and again, 41% of all homes in the United States have no mortgage, 41%. So it's not an anomaly. In this particular case, the Chiefs transaction could advance up to, and in this case, the maximum amount of $326,437. Fine. Then there's an origination fee of 1.5% and $2,000 in fees for appraisal and so on. Here's the point. If you look at column 4 and column 5, what you're going to see is, column 3 and column 4. Column 4 is showing the 326,437 accruing at the max rate of 12.99%. So you can look as that's growing over time. And then column 3 is 50% of the value of the home. The key point to understand is that the amount due to Chiefs in column 5 is the lesser of column 3 and 4. And that's the key to why your affluent client who would never do a reverse mortgage will do a Chiefs. And let me show you. If you look at the Chiefs APR, and it's a little bit higher than in column 6, it's a little bit higher than 12.99 because you've got the fees that is accounted for in the APR calculation. But as you scroll down, let's get out 20 years. Your APR is now down to 7.37. Go out over 30 years, your APR is down to 5.9. The reason for that is because even though there's a 12.99% rate, it's the lesser of the 12.99 or 50% of the value of the home. And so in year 30, 50% of the value of the home is only working out to an APR of 5.9%. Why does this matter? It matters because if you can show affluent clients a way to energize some of their home equity into liquidity and reposition that into annuities or life insurance or other types of investment or insurance products, you can radically improve their income between now and very old age or death, and you can also radically improve their liquidity. Now, last thing on this, for anybody who says, "Hey, we're going to move to Thailand, in the next 3 years," they shouldn't do Chiefs. Chiefs has a very specific client profile where it makes more sense than anything else we've seen on the market. That is the following: people over 50, people who have significant equity in their homes, and people who are in their forever home, meaning they might buy a vacation home or two, but they're 60 years old. It's a married 60-year-old couple. They're not going anywhere. All their friends are there. They belong to the country club there. They're going to be there for a long time. And then the final client profile issue is there one of the two people in a marriage or a single person relatively healthy. If you told me that someone had pancreatic cancer and they had 3 years to live, they shouldn't do Chiefs because Chiefs is inexpensive over the long term in a way that really nothing else can compare. But it has the benefits of a reverse mortgage where you don't have any payments and you never have to pay the money back until such time as the home is sold. And so it presents a really interesting planning opportunity to create liquidity from a client's home equity. So that's sort of how the numbers work. And you can just kind of see how the columns work over time. Chris Jacob is going to explain this more when he runs through the actual case, but I'll just show you one thing here. You're also able to compare a Chiefs transaction over here to a HELOC or to a reverse mortgage. And if you look over here, you're able to then show a graph, which is the numbers page, which sort of compares, for this 55-year-old couple, reverse mortgages, which have significant high fees, are very expensive in the short term. And then they become a little more competitive than the Chiefs in the kind of 5 to 10 year period. And then the brown line, the Chiefs are lower cost than the reverse mortgage.
Hopefully all of you are seeing a Wealthy and Wise workbook here, which, by the way, you will have this available to you. There will be a recording of this available on the InsMark website, along with this workbook and some PDFs that were created off of it. So let's just do a status quo first, and I'm going to show you how I built this. And this is the example of a couple who's 60, and for desired cash flow, we just put in, hey, they want $190,000 adjusted for inflation at 2% starting in year 11. What income do they currently have coming in? Well, the only thing they really got, they don't have a pension. It's just Social Security. I didn't inflate Social Security because usually Medicare and Medicaid eats it up. They have retirement plan assets of $1 million. We are projecting growth on that at 6.5 with a management fee of 1%. And then on the liquid assets, which were brokerage accounts, of currently valued at $1.5 million with the cost basis of $1 million, also at 6.5%, and also with 1% management fees. And they have a $1 million home paid for with projected growth at 2%. Notice we don't have Chiefs button clicked here. So the question is, can they make it with 190,000 adjusted for inflation with these assets and these rates of return? So down and dirty balance sheet, there's your $1.5 million of equity, $1 million of qualified plan assets. We're going to assume they're in the 40% bracket. Joint life expectancy is there at 31 years. Okay. So this is what they need. And 190,000 adjusted for inflation at 2%. They need assets that can deliver 7.7 million of after-tax cash flow. Where's it coming from? The Social Security. So on the cash flow page, here's required, here's provided. You're going to see they don't run out of money here. It gets pretty skinny. But what we're going to do first is draw down on the brokerage accounts. Then we'll just take required minimum distributions from the IRA. Ultimately, the brokerage account runs out and we need to take more, but they're not going to run out of money. So here's our brokerage account, pre-tax pulling this at a 20% cap gains to net that. Once this runs out, switch over to 100% on the qualified plan. Notice on qualified plan money, we're only taking required minimum distributions up until year 39 and year 40. Why? Because that's the year in which the brokerage accounts ran out. So from a liquid asset standpoint, they do have the wherewithal, given these parameters, to not run out of money and still have net after tax in their qualified plan, $238,000 of income. Here's the house growing at 2%. And here's net worth. Illiquid the house, qualified plan assets net of the tax, brokerage account, total net worth. If they both die while there's qualified plan assets, income with respect to a decedent taxation at 40%. Here's the tax that would be levied on those plan. And tail of the tape for wealth transfer to heirs, total estate assets minus the transfer taxes, wealth to heirs. All I did here was copy the status quo and made a change. And although it looks minor, it results in significant benefits. So same thing almost all the way through, except for the fact that we still got desired cash flow at the 190, adjusted for inflation at 2%. Still got the same Social Security, all right? And retirement plan assets, liquid assets stay the same. You'll notice I've got a new box in here, new annuity, because here in where you see the principal residence, just like before, a million growing at 2%, no mortgage, I've now checked that CHEIFS button. And if I go into here, this is going to tell me that $1 million with no mortgage using these assumptions will generate a max benefit of $216,968, right? And just to show you the graphs coming here shortly, these are the assumptions we put in for the HELOC, and these are the assumptions we put in for the reverse. So what we're going to do, though, under illustration details, we're going to reinvest 100% of those CHEIFS proceeds. So we're freeing up a dormant asset, and we're going to reinvest it in an annuity. And that annuity happens to be this one. It doesn't matter, but this is a Allianz ABC annuity. There's the 216,968 going in. We're solving for income that starts at year 15, which is 54,458. And based upon historical returns, you can see here's the income that would be generated along the way. So what we've done is in here, put in those income figures. One of the things, if you're using an annuity with an income guarantee, check that box there, because even when the annuity in InsMark is out of money, it knows that this is still coming in from that guaranteed withdrawal benefit feature. All right. So what you'll see now is the following. You're going to see pretty much the same balance sheet. Got the same 190 that we want, but expected cash flow is not only the 35,000 of Social Security, but this 216,968 provided by the CHEIFS transaction, which, as you're going to see, is going to get reinvested in this annuity. So still want the same income. Where's it going to come from? Well, they're still going to take Social Security. They'll still take RMDs, draw down on those brokerage account assets, but don't have to take as much once the income hits from this annuity. So reinvested into the annuity inside of InsMark looks like this. There's the 216. There's the actual value of the annuity. Here's the pre-tax, which is important because InsMark has a wonderful way that I don't know what other system you could figure out what the after-tax cash flow is coming out of it. But you see that column 4 there? That column 4 is right there where it says after-tax cash flow. If you want to lift up the hood and see how they're calculating it, here it is, just based upon the gains in the policy that would be taxed. And notice now with our brokerage account, we don't run out of money at any point. As a matter of fact, we got a substantial amount left down here. And in addition, remember when we had to go to take here more than the RMDs? Now, when you have the impact of CHEIFS plus the annuity, you're never taking any more than RMDs. And if you recall here, we had only $348,000 of left here. We have significantly more money. So let's look at our liquid assets. Qualified plan assets net of the tax, year-end value of the annuity, brokerage account assets, total liquid assets. Remember what this was? It, it was like 248. So it's amazing what a difference that can make by virtue of the fact that you don't have to sacrifice opportunity costs on your brokerage account or your retirement plan assets. So here's what's happening with the CHEIFS. Don, we gave you a breakdown of this, and here's the assumptions used. When you do that comparison with the HELOC and the reverse, there's that graphic in nice color. You've got for the reverse mortgage, you got some upfront charges. It's interest only for 10 years. I'm sorry, there's the HELOC. You got some upfront charges, interest only for 10 years, but then you pay it back in year 20. So you've got payments with this, and here's the reverse mortgage. So perhaps CHEIFS starts out higher from a percentage, but ultimately much lower than these others, but just provides a bigger bang for your buck when repositioned, in this case, into the annuity. So there's the house growing at 2%. Remember that CHEIFS has this, see where it says amount due CHEIFS if liquidated? So there's the home. There's the portion of the home that is due back to CHEIFS from that chart that we just looked at. So now your net worth is the home minus the amount that's due to CHEIFS, retirement plan assets net of taxes, tax deferred annuity values, and your value of brokerage accounts. You'd still have income with respect to a decedent taxation. There'd be a little bit of taxation on the gain on the annuity, not much. So total estate assets minus taxes on the annuity and the qualified plan assets leaves you wealth to heirs. What we did here was do what InsMark does best, a comparison of do it versus don't do it. And if you haven't been in here in a while, in the report section, we used to have this only have numerical comparisons of alternative net worth. We now have numerical comparison of alternative liquid assets. And you can also go and pick different years for liquid assets graphs, which I did. And to that end, when I do a preview of this, I get the following. Okay, spendable cash flow. Notice this one is for net worth. This really doesn't tell the story with CHEIFS because, okay, we're still better off here, but by what? $1.3 million? Let's incorporate the comparison with liquid assets. Now we're better off by 2.3 million. And once again, year 20 we'll highlight as a graph, life expectancy, and if somebody makes it out to 40 years. So there's our liquid assets in 20 years, better off by about $500,000 for the same income. But get out to that life expectancy, and you've got $2.3 million more liquid here, while at the same time, same income. And if somebody makes it 40 years, all right, you were able to derive the same income all along, but you got about $5.1 million more of liquid net worth for your client here because they didn't have to take money out of those other assets. And you also leave, in this case, about 1.3 million more to heirs at life expectancy. Uh, Another one that we incorporated here was to say, okay, yeah, we know we can have more liquid assets at 190. What could we get from Chiefs if we increase the income? You know, which one goes to 11, as they would say. And in this one, we can start off with $225,000 of income adjusted for inflation at 2%, which is going to take assets that can deliver $9.1 million of after-tax cash flow. Everything's going to look the same here. We're just going to be still taking some more money out of the qualified plan and the brokerage. We've still got the income coming in for the annuity. And here's our qualified plan money, which again, we never take more than RMDs out. And here's our brokerage account, which does, draw down, but there's still money left here. So when we compare the two, what you're going to see under status quo with trying to take $225,000 of income adjusted for inflation, it's going to peter out right about there. All right. These will be depleted. So from a graphic perspective, it looks like this. There's the net worth, but notice, like I said, it really doesn't tell the true story. At life expectancy 2.4 versus 3.6. If we have liquid assets comparison, 584 versus 2.7, all you got coming in here is Social Security. So comparison in 20 years, about $500,000 more in liquid for the same income. All right. If they make it to life expectancy, identical income, but about what, a little better than $2.1 million more of liquid assets. And to the extent somebody makes it 40 years, there's projected cash that's greater by incorporating Chiefs and the annuity by $2.4 million, while at the same time still having 1.3 million of liquid here, but zero here. All right. Uh, People are going to say, how did you get those annuity income and interest rates into InsMark? And let's look for a second. Liquid
Hey,
assets.
Chris, can I interrupt for a
Yeah,
second?
sure.
We've got some comments for some people that are not wealthy and wise users, so they're pretty
Okay.
confused. And so I just want to take a second and just kind of explain. Um, so the Wealthy and Wise software platform, if you've never used it before, I'm sure what Chris is showing is confusing to you. But what I would say is it's an extremely easy program to use. Essentially, what you're doing is if you can just double click on one of those cases, any of
Sure.
them, I just want to show them the Wealthy and Wise
I'll
screen.
do it status quo.
That's fine. Yeah. So what you're doing with status quo is you're going in and you see these tabs. You have preliminary data, desired cash flow, expected cash flow. What you're doing is you're mirroring. Yeah, go ahead and get off of that.
Okay.
What you're doing is you're basically putting in the clients all of their current assets, their real estate assets. You're putting in when they want to retire, how much income they want to have. You're using assumptions for inflation and tax. And you'll have to spend a little bit of time with Jillian Nieri at InsMark, where she can walk you through kind of how to do that. But in 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to be like, okay, I get it. And so once you're putting in all the client's assets, then there's a series of reports you can run that will show you if your current assets and liquidity are going to support the income needs you have between now and throughout retirement. Then what you do is you make a copy of that's called the status quo. Then you make a copy of the status quo and maybe you change something. You could change something as simple as saying instead of retiring at age 65, we're going to retire at age 70. Keep working for 5 more years. But you can make any change that you want, and then you can compare up to 3 different scenarios. So you have the status quo, and then scenario 2, and then scenario 3. Scenario 2 might be retiring at 70 instead of 65. Scenario 3 might be doing a Chiefs transaction, getting some capital out of your home from your home equity and repositioning it into an Allianz annuity like what Chris is showing here. So I just don't want people to be confused on the big picture as far as what Wealthy and Wise does. The power of Wealthy and Wise is it can show you that with regard to any change that you're making for the client, you're not making that recommendation, in this case, buying a deferred annuity, you're not making that recommendation in a vacuum. You're making that recommendation in the context of the overall financial plan in terms of income, in terms of liquidity, in terms of the overall estate value, net to heirs, and all of those things. You're doing things in context of a comprehensive financial analysis. So I just want to make sure, and again, you're not going to learn, you're not going to be an expert on Wealthy and Wise in a 20-minute webinar. What I suggest that you do if you have interest, get a hold of Julie, have her walk you through how Wealthy and Wise works. She can walk you through this case of using CHEIFS to fund a deferred annuity or what have you, and you'll be just fine. This is a very easy product, software product to use. Once you spend a little bit of time kind of walking through the case in a way that we can't do on this webinar because of limited time. Chris, go ahead. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been using this thing, like I said, since 1987, so I've been able to assimilate the changes as they come along. But once you know how to use this, there's nothing you can't do with this software, from estate planning to income projections, you name it, it can do it. And especially when it comes to insurance and annuities and incorporating those, our previous of CHIEFS integration was showing how this can be used with life insurance. All right. So a couple things. One, how do you get the information from the annuity into InsMark? Well, there's a couple different ways. And one is if you can, and if the illustration lets you, you can copy and paste this information in there. Another is you're going to see these buttons throughout InsMark saying RePredict. We don't have time to go through it all today, but what I was able to do here was scrape in that data into RePredict, which is an AI-assisted predictive spreadsheet where you can bring in an illustration, life insurance, annuities, change something, and it'll change everything without you having to go back and rerun a illustration. It's pretty doggone close, as you're going to see. But I can copy and paste these. I can export this, and that's how I got all of this information from the illustration into InsMark. But furthermore, what you can do on the fly, for instance, remember it says premium 216,968, that was the proceeds from CHIEFS. But what if the person says, well, yeah, I want to get that much, but I I really been I want a boat, and the boat I want's approximately 40,000. So I only want to use 175 of this toward the annuity. Well, without having to go back and rerun, I don't have time to show you how to use this. We do have a webinar that does. I'm just going to mark this as dependent, change this to 175,000 so he can get his boat, and just hit predict all. And when I do that, as you're going to see, this one's pretty bang on. If we go see, it starts 43,924, ends at 142,358. What does it look like if I go back and put 175 in the company software? 43,924, 142,358, 100% on. All right. So if you want to learn more about this, really just go to repredict.ai, and we just incorporated a webinar that you can learn how to use this. But you'll notice in here there is also an InsMark button, Plan with InsMark, where when you bring information into here, you can then load it so that it transfers over to InsMark data file. Just makes it a lot easier to play in the sandbox, do what ifs, and bring it over into InsMark. So that's how we got the information in here. But having said all that, a $216,000 transaction into a CHIEFS, from a CHIEFS home equity, not home equity, it's called transaction, made the difference of this. 200, you freed up a dormant asset of 216, you repositioned it in an annuity. You generated about $2.4 million of income, while at the same time of still having $1.3 million of liquid and left $1.2 million more to heirs. I would say that's a pretty big bang for the buck, or a lot of juice for the squeeze, as they would say. So I don't have any more of, rabbits up my sleeve, but when Tony posts this webinar to the website, which you can find recordings of this if you go to Producer Center and Training and Webinars. This one still has to be a bit edited, but this was also Chiefs. And this one will be right here, and you'll be able to download the workbooks. Plus, I actually created PDFs of both of these scenarios and the comparisons and the actual scenarios. So, Don,
Yeah,
that's all I got.
thank Chris. Let me just add one thing. Chris and his business partner, Bob Strauss, have created the RePredict platform, and it is insanely cool. Basically, what you can do is you can bring over a PDF of a life insurance illustration or an annuity or really any mathematical array. And then once it's in RePredict, you can then make a change to the premium or make a change to the amount in the annuity or tell it how much income you want. And it automatically, through AI, learns the underwriting. It learns the underpinning of the actuarial assumptions for that particular life insurance illustration or annuity or whatever it is. And it automatically in 1 second makes the changes. And so it is incredibly efficient from a case designer standpoint when you're trying to target a certain amount of income or you're trying to make assumptions on the fly rather than going back to the carrier software and not knowing, can I change? What about this option or that? They strip all that away, and with AI, you can instantly make any change and then instantly link it over to InsMark. So you should if you're doing the case design, which almost all of us are, or our staff is, you should take a serious look at the RePredict platform. It is tremendous. And so I just wanted to add that. But
Thanks,
sorry,
Don. By
sorry
the
to
way,
interrupt you, Chris. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's right. Now, if you go to repredict.ai and you scroll down, there's a webinar that we just recorded. And if you click that, that'll take you straight to the webinar. It's about 30 minutes of, and if you stay to the end, there's actually a coupon for a discount. Not going to get into the pricing features right now, but it is fairly reasonable. But once you are in InsMark, we've got an integration so that if you hit this and you have an account set up, it will take you, I'm using 3 screens here, it will take you right into the RePredict screen. So it's popped up on my other screen. So that's what's great about it. You can move information back and forth from RePredict and make the changes on the fly without having to go back and use the company software to produce a new illustration. Ultimately, you're going to want to produce a compliant illustration, but all I can say is watch the webinar. It'll save you a bunch of time.
Yeah, and again, when we do the status quo, we're just in Wealthy and Wise, we're just reflecting what the client has now and what's likely to happen in the future with retirement, liquidity, and all the things. When we do a scenario 2, we might be recommending they move some money out of their home equity and reposition it into a life insurance product or an annuity product or whatever. Well, what RePredict does is make it very efficient to get the annuity information into scenario 2 or the LIRP information, life insurance retirement plan information, over into scenario 2. There's other ways to do it. You can go into Wealthy Wise and key in the data. A lot of the life insurance companies have the electronic links. RePredict is just the best way and the easiest way to do it. But there are other ways. In any event, Craig, do you want to add something before we get to our question and answer session?
No, I think Don, you and Chris, really explain well how Chiefs work within InsMark's Wealthy and Wise. And Chris, it goes without saying, you clearly showed the value of home equity by Chiefs when it comes to insurance and financial planning.
Okay. By the way, guys, one other thing. See that Chiefs button? If for whatever reason the person said, let's just go with the million that we had here that produced the 216,968, And they said, "Oh, I forgot. I've got a $150,000 mortgage on this thing. What would I be able to get for that?" Well, it figures it out for you. These would be the same numbers you get if you go back and put it in InsMark. But if you wanted to do some on-the-fly calculations, you could certainly do it right here.
Yes. So between Wealthy and Wise, Chiefs, and RePredict, we're all integrated. We're all in the same symphony. We're all reading from the same sheet of music. We all can do the same calculations, and everybody talks. All the data talks to each other. I know this is a lot for you new to the Wealthy and Wise platform. I get it. I hate new software. It drives me crazy. No matter how easy it is, it's always hard. What I would tell you is schedule a time to talk with Julie in the area at InsMark, and she will, walk you through real simple cases and make sure that you can follow and absorb this. It's not that difficult, but it is new, and everything new is hard. So with that said, let's spend our Q&As typically go 10 or 15 minutes, but the reality is we'll keep answering. We're not, no one has to catch a bus. We're going to keep it. We'll answer any questions that anyone has. So, and we'll go as long as we need to. One of the questions that I see here that I want to throw out to the two founders of Cornerstone, Craig and Dan, is we got the question from James Thompson. He says, I assume the regulators frown on using CHEIFS assets similar to the prohibition of HECM assets used to purchase annuity. How do you address this? Any thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. It's a great question.
It is a great
So
question.
I think what's important to understand is that unlike reverse mortgages, and for that matter, HELOCs and other forms of mortgage debt, Chiefs are actually a forward sale. You're actually selling a fraction of your home. And from the regulator's perspective, the difference between selling 100% of your home and using some of those proceeds to purchase an Allianz annuity, or selling 30% of your home and using those proceeds to purchase an Allianz annuity, you're selling current assets, which is no different than liquidating AUM. So that's sort of the first thing that I would just point out. Secondly, these home equity instruments, of which Chiefs are one of them, have been around for decades. They're not a novel sort of home equity funding product. What is novel is the efficiency that Cornerstone has brought in the form of Chiefs as a viable alternative to using cash, utilizing AUM to fund these different types of products. And it's reflected in the cost relative to some other home financing products like HELOCs and reverse mortgages. So they've been around. Regulators are aware of them. They're not debt. And as a result, the idea of selling 20% of your AUM to fund Allianz ABC versus selling 20% of your home to fund Allianz ABC is seen in the same lens as utilizing current assets to fund your purchases.
Yeah, and let me add to this. I want to tell a personal story because it might help people kind of see this. Because once I saw it, it was like, oh, I get it. My dad, we just celebrated his 89th birthday just this last weekend. And he, a couple years back, he said, hey, guys, I'm thinking about entering into one of these shared appreciation contracts. So there's sort of reverse mortgages, and then you got HELOCs, and then Chiefs is kind of its own category. And then you've got this whole other world of shared appreciation contracts. And so my brother and I looked at this thing, and it was like, Dad, don't do this. My dad's been very successful. He's got a significant net worth, plenty of liquidity to live another 100 years. I mean, he's fine. But he said, well, I kind of like the idea of accessing some of my home equity and putting more cash in the bank. That's home equity. I don't even see it. What do I care? Well, what my brother and I explained to him was, he said, well, the reason we don't think, do whatever you want, but the reason we don't think it's a good idea is we've calculated the internal rate of return, and it's 18.6% forever. That doesn't make a lot of sense, Dad, for someone like you that doesn't need liquidity. But what you have to realize is liquidity is a very powerful driver. He said, I don't care what you two think. I'm doing it anyways. And we said, Dad, it's your money. Do whatever you go to Vegas. Do whatever you want. That's not our message. If you want to do it, great. We'll help you. We'll help you any way you want us to help you. But my point is this: what the Chiefs guys have done is they've figured out how to deliver a product to the somewhat affluent client like my father, but in a way where the long-term APR is, 5 to 10%, not 18. The power of creating liquidity and then ideally not having to pay that money back until the house is sold at a very older age or death. I'm just telling you, that's really attractive to people, and it should be. Whereas the rest of the market is kind of catered towards people desperate for liquidity. The reverse mortgage market, the shared appreciation market. This isn't designed for that. This is designed for people who don't have to sell the farm to get liquidity, but they see CHEIFS as a financial move that improves their overall financial plan. I look, I'm a great example. I'm 62 years old. I would do CHEIFS. I would not do a reverse mortgage. Reverse mortgages are too expensive. They're a 9, 10, 11% APR over time. Not going to do it. Can't swallow it. Can't sleep at night. Now, my dad can. He loves reverse mortgages. Doesn't care what the cost is because he's more focused on liquidity, even though he doesn't need it. So maybe that helps you see this more clearly with kind of a personal example. In any event, next question that's a great question. It says, a reverse mortgage, you got to be 62 years old. You can't really do a reverse mortgage prior to that. Is there a minimum age with this product? Craig, can you address that?
Sure. So there's a no age minimum and there's no age maximum. And unlike a reverse mortgage where a reverse mortgage has to be in a first lien position. So if you've got, if you're one of those lucky people who have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage at 2.75%, which you should keep on your books forever, with a reverse mortgage, you have to pay that off. With the CHEIFS, we can sit behind that really attractive 30-year fixed rate mortgage that you may currently have.
Next question from Ellen Lynn. Does the client need to pay back to CHEIFS monthly? Like a HELOC would be, Craig, is what she's asking. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Don, I like to think of it this way. With CHEIFS, you get a payment from Cornerstone to the homeowner on day one. And the next payment that is made is from the homeowner to Cornerstone when they decide to make that payment. It could be at the time they pass and sell the house. It could be because 5 years from now, they won the lottery and they decide they just want to pay off the CHEIFS transaction. There's no monthly payments for as long as you have the CHEIFS transaction outstanding.
All right. Forgive me. I'm making sure I'm not missing questions here. Okay.
Good question.
Jump in, please. Anybody who wants to ask.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So the maximum that you can pay back cheap is 22.5% of your home, your home value, because that's the maximum loan that
Craig, he's asking, is 22.5% the maximum repayment? And that's not true. It's 50%. But if you could explain that.
Yeah, so the amount that we will invest in a person's house, let's say they have no mortgage on it, we will max out at about 22%. That's the most that the homeowner will get. Why do we do that? Because it's our experience that when we are partners with the homeowner, they own at least 50% of the property and we own the rest, so 50% or less. That makes for the best outcomes for the homeowner and for Cornerstone. So we cap our share of the value of the property at 50%. And the most that we will invest in someone's house on day one is roughly 22% of the value of the property.
Yeah, and this is a great segue. We've run a lot of models comparing CHEIFS to reverse mortgages. And you know what the bottom line is? The bottom line is the client gets some wonderful liquidity now to reposition in annuities or whatever they want to do, or buy a boat, whatever it is. And the result is, with a reverse mortgage, they're going to take his entire house and leave nothing. And with this, they're going to take half. With CHEIFS, they're going to take half the house. That's essentially the reason you do this instead of reverse mortgage with the right fit client that we talked about before. Over 50, isn't desperate for liquidity, has other assets, relatively healthy, all the things. But for a right fit client, the trade-off of getting liquidity now, with a reverse mortgage, you're going to give them the whole house. And with this, you're only going to give them half. That's really the comparison that I saw over and over and over again as we ran models on this. And most clients would like to have their kids get half of the value of the house rather than none. not too complicated. In any event, this was a good question related to this. It said, why, this is from James Thompson, why was there a loan interest component to CHEIFS, the 12.99%, if it's technically a sale? I'm confused. Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, so I put it in the chat room, but it's certainly easy for me to say this again.
Sure, thank you.
We have to determine what is the maximum amount of return that we can get on our investment. And the best way to do that is based off of an annualized rate. So while there's no interest rate explicit in a CHEIFS transaction, what we do is we cap the amount that we can make on our investment at no greater than 12.99% per year. We do that because we want to avoid asymmetric outcomes. As an example, if on $1 million house, we make an investment of $216,968, and that house sells a year later for $2 million, we can't get, 23% of the value of that property. That's just too much. So we cap our return to avoid asymmetrical bad outcomes on the upside. But the flip side of that is if Chris had put in not 2% per annum, but rather negative 2% per annum, and the house depreciated over time, we could end up with a lot less money than the amount that we invested on day one. So we take some risk on the downside and we cap our upside, and we reflect that in a rate cap, but there are no interest rates implicit in a CHEIFS transaction.
Thank you. And I want to add to what you just said. Again, one of the two co-founders of the RePredict platform is Bob Strauss. And when Bob looked at this, he and I were first looking at it about 3 months ago, he said, one of the best parts about this program is it mitigates risk of lower than expected appreciation in real estate. And then let me explain it this way. If we assume real estate's going to grow at 3%, over 30 years, the APR to CHEIFS on their recovery might be 6%. If we assume a lower than 3% growth, their APR is going to be approaching zero. And so, again, you're dealing with people that are ahead by 3 touchdowns, right? Or 2 touchdowns, and we're in the fourth quarter. So what they're trying to do, this particular right fit client in the affluent older market, which is that happens to be the group with all the money too, which is probably who all your clients are, most of them. So it's a perfect fit in terms of who your clients are and who would qualify for CHEIFS. But again, they're trying to minimize risk. They're not 25. And so we all know real estate can go down. It doesn't just go up. And this is a fantastic hedge to that, to create some liquidity now and throw the risk of lower than expected returns on real estate, give that all to CHEIFS and Cornerstone, let them deal with it. That's a great plan. Most people are going to like that because it's risk mitigation at this age and this type of client. I don't see any more questions unless you all see.
I have one.
Go ahead.
You guys, I haven't asked this one yet, and maybe some people will think about this. Two questions. One, what's the maximum amount I can have as a lien against my house? So, I mean, I know if I put this in there and I put in $100,000 is my current mortgage, and I go into here, now I get less, right? Two things. One, what's the maximum amount of loan to value currently that will allow for a CHEIFS transaction? And two, of Dan and Craig, I just ran into this. One of my clients has a home equity loan and home equity line of credit, and the house is worth 700. They got a home equity line of credit against it for 100. Can you still do CHEIFS with that? How does that work? So two-pronged question. What's loan to value, and can it still work with somebody's got a HELOC against the house?
So put in $500,000 in the outstanding balance, Chris.
Okay.
And then run the numbers. You'll see a big fat zero.
Yes. Okay.
There it is.
So basically, if your client has a mortgage that is greater than 50% of the value of the property, chiefs are probably not the right thing for them to be considering to do.
Yeah. Okay.
That's right. And then secondly, Chris, yeah, if they have a HELOC is no different than a mortgage. Um, they can certainly do it.
And then, okay, this is one for the books. Okay, I know you guys said that you can't do it if somebody's renting their house, but she has a house with a HELOC on it, uh, and she has somebody renting out her basement. Okay, I know that's dancing on the head of a pin, but would a Chiefs transaction be allowed for that?
Yeah, that
Good
would
question.
work. Yeah, it's
That's a
it's an
good
owner
question.
occupied property and they have somebody sharing a room basically.
Okay,
That's
got
a great question, Chris. There's a lot of people doing that, especially people at older ages because they need the company or a little
That's
help.
right.
That's a good question. And you're saying, Craig, that's okay?
That's absolutely okay.
Okay, got it. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you for everyone attending. I don't see any other questions. Look out for our fifth webinar in this Sales Ideas with Chris Jacobs series. We'll probably have that scheduled in a month or so. And tell everybody about this. We're trying to get as big a community as possible to do these events once a month or so and share sales ideas. And with that, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, InsMark team.
bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.